Hello there, my name is Koa Johnson. I'm the Multi-Literacy Student Outreach at the WMC, which is a lot of fancy words, but basically I am just an administrator at the WMC who also does student outreach as well as being a tutor. And I'm here to welcome you all to the Introduction to Openshot Asynchronous workshop. So today we're going to be going over how to use Openshot, which is a video editing software that is completely free to everyone in the public domain. So that's what we're going to be going over today. I'm just going to be talking about kind of some of the basics of the tools that we can use, some of the most common things that we'll be using, like trimming, splitting audio, adding in transitions, things like that, as well as getting you more familiar with it. In our normal sort of asynchronous workshop version of this, there is a little bit of a practice near the very end, but since we are doing this asynchronously, I'd highly encourage you to install it as I'm going through the steps on how to install it, as well as kind of going through and sort of playing with the tools as I'm playing with them as well. So feel free to pause and move forward as you see fit. But I just wanted to sort of let you know that a lot of using this program is just going to be familiarity. So I think the more that you can practice, the better you'll do with it. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Just an overview of kind of what I'm going to go ahead and do today, or at least the sort of content of this workshop is I'm going to talk about some of the resources that are available to you regarding Openshot and kind of what exists out there. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to install it, and then we're going to spend most of our time talking about the different tools in Openshot that we can use. We're not going to go over every single one, but we're going to go over a sort of a large amount of them. And then lastly, there's that little bit of practice there. We're going to skip that just because we are asynchronous today, and I would encourage you to practice kind of in between sort of my slides, essentially. So when I talk about how to use the playhead, maybe just pause a little bit after I show you to sort of mess around with the playhead, just to make sure that you have an understanding of how it works. So let's talk about a little bit of resources when it comes to Openshot. So obviously the Writing and Multi-Literacy Center is here to help you. That's why we have this workshop, and that's why we have tutors who know how to use Openshot to be able to help you in tutoring sessions as well. So not only can we help you, but we also want to make sure that you know the resources that are available to help you on your own. So in addition to us, there's also the user guide that Openshot has. So if you go to openshot.org/users-guide, that will bring up the user guide. And essentially the user guide, if we just click on it here, and let me sort of, okay, cool, my screen is here, and you hit launch user guide, it'll basically have, again, a bunch of really awesome sort of user guides that tell you sort of tutorials on how to do things like video editing basics, talks about conclusions here, talks about sort of the basic installations, how to create clean installs, all that good stuff. So you can see there is a lot of materials that you can use that exists already out there. So I just want to make sure that you know that even if you do have a question and I don't answer it in this sort of session and you don't have time to meet with a WMC tutor, just know that there are resources out there available to you. Also, YouTube's great. We've all searched up how to do things on YouTube, and when it comes to tech and things like that, chances are there's someone with 12 subscribers out there that is more than happy to answer your question and will do so very thoroughly. So I'd say go ahead and give YouTube a spin or sort of check out this user guide if you have any questions. Oop, there we go. Sorry, right here. Check out that user guide if you have any of those questions, or again, come see a WMC tutor. So those are just the resources that I wanted to sort of just make very readily apparent to you. Beyond that, let's talk a little bit about installation. So installation in Openshot is pretty easy. All you're going to go to is you're just going to go to openshot.org/download. If I click on this link, it'll actually sort of pull up here. And as you can see that it has this immediate sort of thing here. And you can notice that between sort of what I've listed here, it looks different here. This is because it automatically detects what platform you're on. So in this case, I'm on a Mac, so it's going to say, oh, okay, this is with the OS one. You click download, it'll download it, and you go through the process of downloading that file. So same thing if you have Windows, it should automatically go to Windows, but you can see on the bottom here, if you have sort of a Chromebook, if you have a Linux, or if you have Windows, you can click here if it didn't automatically detect that. So that's how you install it. You're just going to click on that button, it'll install it, and then you install it as if you were to install any other application. So let's talk about some of the tools. So now we're going to finally, again, get into some of these details. So firstly, I want to talk about, if we open up Openshot, this is what we're going to see. Very basic. It doesn't really have anything on it, but I just want to familiarize yourself with three main areas, which is this area, and this area. So the one on the top right is going to be the canvas. The canvas is basically a video preview of what you're going to do, and it's what you see, what you get for the final video. If you put in an image that's behind the video and in the sort of video preview, the image doesn't show up and you're like, oh, it'll show up in the final product. No, it won't. If it's not showing up in the video preview, it's not going to show up in the final thing. Sometimes Openshot lags a little bit and there's a little bit of a delay where like a transition will look a little stuttery. In that case, chances are it'll be fine in sort of the final product. But when it comes to like overall sort of larger elements, like whether or not a video or entire image is present or not, there's likely sort of something going wrong there in terms, not because of the lag or anything like that, but because we don't have it in the finals or we don't have it on the right layer and stuff. So basically the canvas is what you see, what you get. It's going to have most of those details. So I just want to sort of let you know what that is, just because I want to talk about sort of canvas and things like that. So I just want to make sure you're familiar with the terms. On the left here, we have the project files. So the project files are basically where you're going to put in your media. So this includes video, audio, images, all that good stuff that's going to be in the project files. When you have things in the project files, it won't actually play anything until you drag them onto the track, and then it will show up on the canvas and begin to play. So the track is this. So these are the different tracks, or the sort of the timeline, if it were. So this is where you place different pieces of media onto the track itself, and you can edit multiple videos and you can kind of drag them around. Just so you're aware, it's organized by layers. So the topmost layer is what's going to be the forefront to the screen, and the second layer is going to be slightly behind it, and the third layer is going to be slightly behind it. And that might matter, again, if you want to have an image on top of a video or so on and so forth. So those are the basic tools, or at least it's kind of like the sort of main sort of three things that I want you to know before we jump into the program. So let's go ahead and start by importing audio or importing video. So importing, or basically getting our files in there. So the way we do that is very simple. You're just going to go to File, you're going to go to Import Files, and then you're just going to select the files you want. Alternatively, you can click on the little plus that looks like this, and it will go ahead and just add in a sort of file, and you'll be good from there. So why don't we take a look at what that looks like in Openshot. So let me make sure I'm sharing audio as well. Yes, I am. Great. Okay, so this is what Openshot looks like. Again, I just opened it up. You can see there's nothing here. It's pretty blank. So let's get some files in here. So like I said, you can click on this little sort of plus here, which is import files, or you can go to File, Import Files. Either way, when you click on them, it'll pull up to where you have sort of either you can put it in your desktops, wherever, desktop, all that good stuff. For now, I have some sort of items in the desktop here, so I'm just going to go ahead and put in all of these different things because we're going to use all these today. So I'm going to select all of them. I'm going to hit open. And you can see now I have some sort of files in the project file. Again, nothing showing up on the canvas, nothing showing up on the timeline, because right now we just say that they're in, they're just there. So let's start with this. So say these are two video clips that I want to include. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click and drag it onto the timeline. And when I do so, you can now see that we can move it around, and we play it here and we hit play. It begins to go through. So it looks like the audio is a little bit sort of wonky on my end, but that's okay. Let me double check something. Okay, no worries. So, but you can see here, all I did was I just clicked and dragged. So to import files, to get it in here, you're just going to go to, again, File, Import Files, and then you're just going to choose a file that you want. So I'll just do this one again, and it'll show up in here. Once you have them in here, then if you want to actually see them and sort of put them onto your timeline, what you're going to do is you're going to click and drag them onto the timeline, and then from here it'll go. So you can see it's already keeping track of time. Right now we're at 0 seconds, and then right now we have it so that way there's 16 seconds, it looks like, of dead air, of just nothing but black, before we go into the actual sort of video itself, where then it begins playing as normal. We can see what it looks like in the top right there. So again, File, Import, and then from there, once you have your project files, you can click and drag them onto the timeline where you can begin organizing and moving them around. So I was already playing a little bit with this, which is called the playhead. So let's talk a little bit about the playhead and what that kind of does. So now that we've imported the audio, let's go ahead and talk about the playhead. So the playhead basically tells you what you will see in the timeline. Hitting space or hitting the play button will either cause the playhead to stop moving and pause at that direction, at that area, or it will kind of resume and begin playing from where that playhead is. You can jump to wherever you want in the video by clicking and dragging the playhead, and this is basically letting you know where you are on the timeline. So let me show you how that looks like in Openshot. So I was kind of already doing it already, but you can see this is the playhead right here. As you can see, as I'm clicking and dragging it, it is moving the video because it's showing us actively that, hey, this is like how it kind of looks like. And you can see it's looking a little bit sort of like a little weird here because we're going really fast. But if I, for some reason, want to see what happened at the 30-second mark, I can just drag it over to where it says 32 seconds. And I can hit this play button here, hit space, and it'll begin playing. So that's how we kind of move things around. If we wanted to add in multiple files, because keep in mind, I talked about tracks, I talked about different media. Right now, let's say I just wanted to like put in sort of an image here. So right now, the image actually doesn't show up, but you can see there's like a weird outline here. That's because it's trying to outline the sort of image that we put in. But because it's behind, like I sort of mentioned, that layering, it's not going to show up because it's not on the right layer. So we're just going to move this down, and then voila, it's suddenly shown up. So I just want to sort of mention kind of like how that works. So for images, you can kind of just drag them across, and this just means how long they're going to be on the screen for. So you can see this is going on for about minute 20, and then it sort of disappears. So for a video like this, I probably want there to be like some kind of intro where you see the WMC's logo, then we start talking. So maybe we can do like 5 or so seconds of that, or say this is 15 seconds, so it's maybe like 10 seconds or so. We can scroll back here, and you can see now if we hit play, it'll just play this sort of image, this still image with nothing behind it. So that's a little bit too long. Let's change that back to like 5 or so seconds. So again, we'll click and drag it here, and we'll pull it up, and it'll actually snap to that. So that way it'll be sort of kind of seamless there. We hit play. So right now it'll just show this image. It won't show any video yet. And then it'll just like completely cut to the video itself, and the video will begin playing. We can do the same thing for the sort of layer at the very end. You're also probably asking, does it have to be in the same track? No, it doesn't. If you want to do it this way, so that way it's a little bit easier for you to visualize, you can also do that as well, where the video will end, and then after the video ends, it'll play whatever we have next on the timeline. I just want to show you a little bit of how that works in terms of like moving things around. So let's go ahead and move forward with the next little bit here, which is going to be talking about media properties. So whenever you click on a sort of image or you right click on an image, it will show these properties. These properties basically showcase essentially everything about the image. So right now it tells you like there's a lot of stuff in here, like alpha, channel filter, enable audio, enable video, all this incredible stuff. We don't need to sort of mess around with a lot of this, but you can if you'd like to. But basically, this is where we can see all of the different elements. And sometimes we can actually change some of these elements. So one of the things you'll notice is when I put that image in, it was really big and it was like taking up the entire screen. And maybe we want to move it around so it's just in the corner. The way that when we actually physically move the image, it will change these values. It'll change actually location X and location Y, because it'll be like, oh, okay, you're moving the X, you're moving it to this corner, which is going to be X this value, Y this value. This is really important just because when you are going to be moving things around, Openshot has something called keyframes. And if you are changing any kind of value, which involves moving it around because that's changing the X and Y values, if the playhead is not at the very beginning of the clip, it will create a keyframe. And basically it'll say, oh, okay, you want us to make sure that this image that you moved is at this spot at this exact point in time. And then it'll kind of try and automatically adjust. So you want to make sure that when you are sort of making some small edits, like moving it around or changing volume overall, that you're doing it in the very beginning of the clip, not when your playhead's in the middle of the clip. So let me show you what that looks like. So let's do, oh, whoops. Okay, there you go. So stop share, re-share, Openshot, voila. So for example, we have our image here, right? Let's say we want this to be smaller. So let's select this. And right now, we'll just have it where it's in the middle. So right now we have the playhead right here. And we're going to try and kind of make this a little bit smaller. So I'm just going to, you can see it's a little bit wonky here, but let's try and get it so that way it's like, like right here. So you'll notice right here is that there's these little dots. And that lets us know that it just created a keyframe. So let's look at these properties. So right now I'm clicking on these, there's no property showing up. But if you right click or hold Control and click, then select properties, this will show up. And you can see, like I was saying, this, it looks like it changed the scale of it. So it's saying, okay, scale X and scale Y have changed. And as you can see, those values are slowly changing because we changed it halfway through. Because we changed it halfway through, it's basically going to say, oh, okay, you want it to slowly shrink. We'll go over how to exactly use keyframes, but if we want to make static changes where these things don't happen, we're going to have to remove these keyframes. So just get remove, again, right click or control click, hit remove, and right now they're gone. But if we want to make those changes, make sure that you can click this button right here, which basically means it'll like go to the very end. Or it should usually kind of like snap to. But essentially what you're going to do is you're going to get to the point where it's at the very beginning of that clip. And then from there, you're going to go ahead and change some things. So you can see right here, it looks like we're still getting that keyframe. So it has to be pretty precise. So usually I recommend just having it on a sort of separate, sort of putting it sort of separately, and then sort of forwarding to the very beginning. So that way you know for sure that if you're going to make some changes to it, it won't create that keyframe. You can see now it isn't creating keyframe. It's just recognizing that as a overall change that we're doing. So we'll move this back here and we'll do this for the image. So again, since we have it at the very beginning, we'll click and drag here and you can see the scale and stuff has changed. But if we hit play, there's no little dots here. There's no sort of variability in it. So that is just wanted to briefly mention that and those different properties. And again, you can change all these different things. You can change the start time. You can change the volume. So you can see it should have the volume sort of enabled. It looks like there's just an issue with the computer I'm using, but that's okay. So yeah, let's go ahead and go back to our presentation. Normally I'd take a minute to stop for questions here, but looks like it's asynchronous, so that's okay. But if there are questions, again, contact the WMC. Okie dokie. Let us talk now about separating the audio and video. So in this case, sometimes it might be helpful if you want to make it so it's a little bit less loud, or so that way you can change the audio from the video. I just want to really quickly show you how you can do that. Basically what you're going to do is you're going to do separate audio, and then you're going to right click it or sort of control click and then go separate audio and single clip. And I just want to let you know, just because it is a tool that is useful if you do need to, for some reason, see the audio and see what it looks like, and you need to change it around somehow. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to control click, I'm going to click separate audio, single clip, and what it'll do now is now you'll see it can actually sort of give us a visual representation of the audio. So now we have both where we have the video playing on top and the audio playing on bottom. And if we wanted to, we could actually move the audio here. So now this part of the video won't have any audio, but the beginning of the video's audio will actually start playing in the middle. So I don't know why we want to do that in that specific case, but I just want to sort of let you know that that is something that you can do. And again, the way we do that is you would just control click, separate audio, single clip, and it'll produce that clip. You notice here that I just sort of undid everything. Just like sort of all the wonderful tools like Google Docs and stuff like that, there is an undo and redo button, or you can just hit Control Z. So for now, we're going to keep them both in here. But something that you are noticing is that we have like, okay, so we have this little video here, and we have an introduction that kind of abruptly stops. And then it looks like she doesn't start talking until probably about, let's see, right. Okay, so it looks like right about there is when they start talking, maybe about sort of 15 or 16 seconds in. So there's about 15, 16 seconds where someone else is speaking, but I only want the clip where this woman is speaking. So in that case, we're probably gonna have to separate it and sort of delete some stuff. Right now, if I try deleting it, if I just click right here and I hit delete, it'll just delete the entire audio. We don't want that. We just want to delete a small part of that. So how do we do that? Through splitting the audio, or sort of, so through splitting and sort of trimming. So the way we do that, as I'm going to talk about here, is essentially we're going to be slicing it, or splitting it, or trimming it, whatever you want to call it. But basically what you're going to do is you're going to put the playhead where you want it to split. From there, you're going to right click it, or you're going to control click it. You're going to hit slice all and then keep both sides, just so that way you can kind of visually see which one you're going to delete. And then from there, you'll have two separate clips that you can kind of just move around. So let us go ahead and see what that looks like. So again, I said it is about 15 seconds where we want the sort of video to start. So I have my playhead at 15 seconds roughly. We're going to control click. We're going to hit slice all, keep both sides. And hey, now we have these two separate clips that we can use. So we can take this and drag it somewhere else if we want it for something else. You can now see the clip itself starts at that point that I sort of split at, where this person begins speaking. So you can see now I can move it here, and now we have it. So it's like, oh, the logo, then she starts speaking, great. And now we have this other sort of video clip, which is the very beginning of the video where someone else is talking. If we don't want this, we can click on it and then just hit delete on the keyboard, and then poof, it'll be gone. So again, how we sort of trim stuff here is we're just going to undo, there we go. Get to that 15-second mark. You're going to control click on the playhead or right click on the playhead. You're going to go to slice all, keep both sides. That'll separate into two separate little files there that you can move around. And we're just going to go ahead and delete that for the purposes of what we have here. Great. let's go ahead and move forward now. So now that we've sliced them, let's talk about sort of dragging an image. So I kind of already showed you this, but basically what you're going to do is you're going to click on an image and you're going to drag it down. And when you drag it down, it will show up and it'll kind of be there. I realized I kind of went over this, so I went a little bit ahead of myself. I wanted to make sure that it made sense. But like I was saying, it's just a reminder that's very important is that the tracks are like layers. If the image is below your video, it is on a lower layer and it won't show up necessarily. And that's what I showed you in the very beginning here. So you just want to keep in mind of like where you have things layered or if they're on the same layer, so on and so forth. Okay, so let's talk about titles and annotations. Right now we have the WMC logo in the very beginning, which is great, but maybe we want to have it where it says how to do a pitch or some kind of title of what it is. Openshot has an interesting way to do titles, so I'm going to show you on how to create those sort of pre-made text boxes and add in those titles. So the way we do it is essentially you're going to go to sort of title and then you're going to add in title, but I'll show you that right now. So we're on Openshot. What you're going to do is you're going to go to title, and it'll pull up this. So Openshot has these basically like these pre-made sort of titles and kind of what they look like. And in these, you can see that they have like something that looks like this, something that looks like this with these very 2000s early corporate bubbles that are like someone just learned MS Paint. So like they're a little bit on the older side, but you can change a lot of these details. You can change the text color, the font color, the background color. And what this does is it'll basically create a file for you, an image for you that you can then drag in. So let's maybe change this to making a WMC pitch. And let's have the text color maybe be some kind of like red or something. You can see you can also pick screen color, so you can like go around and sort of change different colors and things like that if you want to sort of do that. But for now, let's just do like a basic red, something that's similar to CI's color. So now we have the text color, so making a WMC pitch with the background color being black. We hit save, and what will show up is, okay, sorry about that. There's just something weird going on. I'm just going to go ahead and reshare my screen just in case. Okay, but you can see now it actually created a new file, and then from there we can click and drag it in there. So if we want to have sort of in addition to sort of the WMC logo, in addition to the WMC logo showing up, we also want there to be some kind of title card. We can do so like that. So now we can see that we have this guy right here that shows up. So you can see he has a little bit of a sort of a nice background here. And right now, if we try and click and drag, it's not going to change anything. We're like, hey, what are we changing? We're actually changing the video right now because we have the video selected. So we'll go to the title. And then once you hit the title, it'll basically like show up now. So let's go ahead and maybe let's make this a little bit bigger. So make you a little bigger. So we have making a WMC pitch. And maybe now because of that, we want this to be smaller. So let's go ahead and change that as well. Great. So now we have a making a WMC pitch, which is awesome. And we have a sort of little logo here. As it currently stands, if we hit play, you can notice here that we have it so that way the title goes on and you can see the image here actually ends at this point. So if we hit play, it'll just again show it here and then the image will just be gone, but the sort of title will exist for however long we have it, and then it'll go into the video. If we want to match it up, we'll just click and drag this right here, and we can see that it matches in line with there, and we'll click and drag this over. So now we have it where, like before, we have those nice 5 seconds where we have, okay, making a WMC pitch, WMC logo, boom, video, which is great. So that's how we add those titles. So again, you're going to go to title in the top left, hit title again. And once you do those both, you'll just choose one that works. So you can see this one has a little border. So yeah, we can say this one. Maybe we'll just do this one right here. And we can sand it so that way the background color is like a gray or something like that. Or right now it just said nothing. So we'll say, yeah, sure, a gray or a white, or yeah, we'll just do a black for now. We'll hit OK, and we'll do another sample title. You can notice that there's an advanced editor. Unfortunately, to get the advanced editor, you have to install something separate. So we're just going to do the normal stuff here. But if we just drag this in, we now have another sort of title that we can use for something like that. We can, again, click and drag things around, sort of move it around, change all those values, all that good stuff. Okie dokie. Let's go ahead and move forward then. So slideshow, boom. Okay, so now that we talked about how to make those titles, let's talk about how to add in transitions. So in Openshot, there are a plethora of different transitions and effects. So essentially what these do is these allow you to essentially fade in and fade out or create other transitions when going from image to image. So right now we have it where it's the WMC logo just very abruptly just appears and then disappears. We might want to add a sort of a simple sort of fade or something like that. So the way we'd add in a transition or effect is basically we're just going to click and drag it in. And once we do so, it'll be in there. So let me show you how that works. There's a little bit more details, but for now, let's start with this. So let's make it so that way both of these guys have some kind of transition. So under here, we have the project files, transitions, effects, emojis. So you can see when it comes to transitions, there's a lot of transitions. And you can see when it comes to effects, there's a lot of effects. So the effects definitely change things about sort of what's going on. If you want there to be negative colors, you want the hue to change, you want there to be echo or distortion, you can basically click on these different things, drag them into it, and it'll sort of make those changes. But for now, let's talk about transitions. So let's have it where there is just a very simple fade. So you can see there's a lot of sort of very silly ones or a lot of sort of really big ones that we want to sort of change around. But let's look for a basic fade if I can find it. F, where are you? There it is. Oh, well, it's at the very top because it's super simple. So we're just going to do, what we're going to do is we're going to click and drag it. And then what you can see here is it creates this little sort of blue box. And what the blue box basically tells us is like when the start of the fade is and when the transition starts and when the transition ends. So if we put it in the very center right here and we hit play, it'll just have this sort of moment where the video looks like it's trying to fade and it looks like it finally does start fading and then it just comes back in randomly because we have it in the very middle. And you can see that was over a very long course of time, but let's just go ahead and put that fade over here. And we want it right now, so that way it gets to this point. So let's also zoom in. So I believe, yeah, so let's click and drag this to zoom in. So you can see right now it's basically saying like, oh, how much of the timeline do you want to see? So we're just going to zoom in like this. So we just get a little bit of a better idea. So it's a little bit sort of more obvious here. And let's have it so that way we want the fade to end at the point, or we want the fade to end at that point. So if we hit play right here, right now, the WMC, like the title, will begin to fade and finish fading at the end of this clip. And then it'll kind of just go to from there. If we want to have it where a fade kind of happens between the two, we can just do this. And you can see it's kind of having trouble there. So we're just going to click and drag this one here. So we'll have all these different fades. So we have one that's sort of fading out, one that's fading in. Sort of now that we have it sort of between the two. And we have that sort of nice little fade. And you can see it's still abruptly stopped here because we don't have a fade under this guy. So we're just going to create one here as well. And we're again going to click and drag it so it's the right size. Now we have it for 5 seconds. And we have it where a fade just occurs and they slowly fade in. Great. If we want to make it so it's a little bit less jarring, we can always increase the size of the fade here, doing so like that. And now we go ahead and hit play again. It'll begin fading out. It'll begin fading in. So you can see that's the basic of the transitions. So what you're going to be doing essentially is you will just click and drag a transition. You will sort of apply it. And then if it's between, if you want it so that way there's like a clip that just slowly fades out or goes from one to the other, it'll go through. And so what you're going to do is, again, just clicking and dragging it on top of this sort of clip that you want that transition to happen with. So let's try, yeah, so we're going to have everything fade left to right. And then maybe we'll try, actually for this one, we'll do fade from right to left. See how that looks. And we'll have it so it goes like this. So again, we go to the very beginning. We hit play. It'll just go through. It'll fade, slowly fade out, and then this one will fade in. Wow. So that is how we do fades, or how we do sort of transitions. Now, there is another way to do transitions, what I want to talk about very briefly, which is going to be crossfading. So like I sort of mentioned, or sort of cross-transitioning. So Like I mentioned, there were you can just click and drag it onto it. But if you want it to have where two things automatically go from one to the other, we want to create that manual, if you want to create sort of those like manual transitions, you can see there's multiple ways to do it. So there's one way you can do it where, again, it's just like where it finishes the animation and then it starts a new animation directly after. And that we can do that with sort of just clicking and dragging it. But there's another way we can do it where we can manually use any transition to kind of like have it where as this one begins to fade in, the other one will as one begins to fade out, the other one will begin to fade in. And there's a few different ways we can do that. For a simple fade, Openshot makes it easy, thankfully, where, say, for example, we want there to be that fade between these two sort of objects, or between just the sort of logo and just the sort of person talking. So we have the logo, and then we have them immediately talking. If we want to create a fade where one fades out, one fades in at the exact same time, all you're going to do is just drag them on top of each other for however long you want the fade to be. And then it will automatically create that fade, and it will automatically create that sort of cross transition. So it'll fade out as the exact time as the other one fades in. So there's no sort of like black sort of space like we saw earlier. So again, to kind of create that sort of basic fade, again, what you'll do is you'll just drag it on top and it'll be the fade in between. So say, for example, we had another video. So let's say I had this video right here. I'm just going to go ahead and drag it in. And we wanted this video to play, or we want this video to essentially sort of stop, and then there to be kind of like a fade into the other video. We'll click and drag it over. And now at this point, it will begin to slowly fade away, and the other one will fade in completely to overtake it. So again, that's the first way to do it, is just clicking and dragging. But there is another way to do it as well if you don't want the fade and you want a very specific one. And that is going to be a little bit more complicated. The way we do that is essentially you're going to grab the transition you want, like we did earlier, the very first time. We're going to put it on the track. Then from there, you're going to drag it over, and you're going to drag it to a point where basically where you want it to, so it's the end of the transition is at the end of the video. Then you're going to take the other video and put it to the very beginning of the transition. What this means is it'll say at the very beginning point, of the transition, the old video will begin to transition as well as the new video. At the end of the transition, this video will end and you'll finish the transition to the new video. So also, if the transition doesn't work, sometimes you need to reverse it. I'll show you that right now. So we have these two videos. Let's say, for example, we want the big Lasange sort of transition between the two. What we'll do is we'll just have it right here, and we'll again click and drag it so that way the end of this transition is matching at the end of the video. And then we're going to click and drag this and have it so that way it's at the beginning of the transition. Have we done it correctly? So you can see it's glitching out a little bit, and it looks like it's starting to do it. In that case, we'll just control click here, reverse transition, then we'll hit play. And now things should look a little bit better where it begins to fade out through that transition and the other one begins to fade in. So again, the way we do it is we take any transition we want. If we want to have that sort of cross transition between them, we'll do 4 squares right, sure. You'll sort of move it. So let's make this a little bit smaller. You'll move it so that way the end of the transition is at the end of the first video, or where you want it to sort of transition from one to the other. And you'll take the second video or the second media element and you'll drag it over to the very beginning of the transition. Then from there, if it looks like that, where it's kind of like immediately abrupt, I'm going to control click, hit reverse transition. And it'll go through that transition. There you go. So let's go ahead and delete this, put this there. And we'll just have it so that way there's a nice little fade there. Okay. So let's talk about keyframes. So one of the things, now that we've talked about sort of transitions and we add in these transitions, let's talk about those ideas of changing those values. So if we change a value at any point during the at any point where our cursor is, or our playhead is not the very beginning, it'll try and create a keyframe. That keyframe allows you to basically slowly change a value. So this is really useful for if you want a image to run or move across the screen, if you want an image to slowly decrease or increase in size, or if you want an audio to slowly fade out. But the way we do all that is, again, when we have the cursor, we can insert where we have the cursor, we can just right click something and click insert keyframe, and it will actually sort of insert that keyframe. And I'll show you how that works right now. So say, for example, let's go ahead and go back to the beginning here, where we also want, let's go to the very end here, and we want the audio to slowly fade out. So I'm actually going to move us all the way over here. And so we can get a better visual of this, I'm going to go ahead and separate the audio. So we can now see where the audio is. And you can see it looks like it already has kind of a bit of a fade, but say, for example, it doesn't. Actually, for a better example, let's do it on the very first audio. Because the very first audio, it looks like doesn't have that. So let's go ahead and undo some stuff. We'll go ahead and zoom out here. Okay, so we'll go ahead and remove these for now. And we'll pull us all over here. We'll zoom in here. Okay, and then let's do this again. So let's do separate audio, single channel. Great. Now that we've separated the audio, you can see that it actually doesn't really it doesn't have a nice little sort of zoom out or doesn't fade out slowly. You can see there's a little abruptness here. So what we're going to go ahead and do is, let's say at this point, we want the audio to be 0. So we'll move the cursor here. We'll go to volume because we're trying to change volume. Control click. We'll do insert keyframe. And so right now it's saying we have a keyframe from the very beginning of the video to the very end. And if we change it at the very end, so if we go over here and we change this to 0, you can see it changed all the way from the very beginning of the audio to the very end. We don't want that. We want it between a very specific point in time. So let's go ahead and remove this keyframe. So control click, remove keyframe, and let's try it like right here. So once again, select it, insert keyframe, and then let's try inserting another keyframe. There we go. So now it's kind of recognized that we have these two keyframes between here and here. So let's change this one to 0. And you can see now we have it so that way it's done this slow fading out. So that way the volume is now really low. So as again, if we don't want these here, we can always just remove keyframe and go here and we can do remove keyframe. So again, let's go ahead and show you how that works for maybe something like this. So say, for example, we want this to go from, for some reason, we want it to be like the entire screen, and then we want it to be, or go from something small to really big. So right now we have it where it's right here. Let's go to the very end and we'll do, I think it would be scale here. So I think if we can just change it, it'll automatically create that keyframe. Great. So we'll just increase the scale like that, have it move up like that. And you can see now it's already created that keyframe for us because we edited those values. So sometimes you don't even need to insert a keyframe. You can see if we hit play, it'll just slowly move into that position we put it. So again, the way you create keyframes is it should automatically do it whenever you just, again, change a value here. It'll automatically create the keyframe, and it will try and kind of create that sort of change for you. So in this case, it's changing the origin of it, which doesn't do anything. But if you want between two specific areas, what you'll do is you'll right click the thing that you're going to change. So in this case, we can just do volume. You'll do insert keyframe. And then again, you'll do insert keyframe. And then from here to here, you can see there's some change. We actually don't want this one. So we'll remove this keyframe. We'll go here. We'll change back to here and we'll put the volume to 0. And you can see it'll automatically make those changes between one to the other. Okay, and those are keyframes. So that about does it for this Openshot asynchronous workshop. I hope this has been helpful in your understanding of sort of Openshot as a whole. So just as a reminder, again, Openshot is similar to other video editing programs. The main thing that you want to keep in mind is that I'll kind of just go over very briefly is when you're going to be making overall changes, make sure it's at the very beginning of the clip. Otherwise, it'll create a keyframe like we just mentioned, and it'll kind of slowly change values. And when you're going to want to add effects or transitions, you're just going to click and drag. Most of it is just click and draggable. The most easy fade, like just the simple from one to the other, is just clicking and dragging two clips up on top of each other, and it'll just go so like that, and it'll just automatically create that crossfade. But you can always manually create those sort of transitions by, again, putting it in the center and kind of aligning them, or by creating two transitions on top of each other. So that has been my workshop for today. Hope this has been helpful for you and your understanding of Openshot. As always, if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to make an appointment at the WMC, or again, sort of look at all various resources. This has been Koa Johnson. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day.